Welcome to the Airgun Extra Podcast, brought to you in association with Crackshot, the Southwest's premier airgun centre and ranges. I will put a link to the Crackshot website in the show description. Do check out the description when we finish, actually, because we try to include useful links there, and often you'll also find some discount codes. I'm Matt Manning. With me, I've got my mate Rich Saunders. As ever, hiya Rich. As ever, we've got a lot to get through. We have got some kit to look at. Most of that's fairly, well, I'd say low-tech, low-cost stuff this week. We have got the usual Q&A section brought to you in association with Anglia Tackle and Gun. I know we've got one particularly interesting question there about being frightened when you're out shooting at night, and I can see that could inspire a few interesting ghost stories. Before we get right into it, Rich, let's have a bit of usual sort of catch up on our own shooting. You go first. What have you been up to lately?
It's been rats, and then a mink, and then rats again. I think I spoke on the last podcast about my glory hole session. We've been doing more of that, and I've just been shooting lots and lots of rats down on the chicken farm. It's gratifying, really, because we've made a very obvious and welcome difference to the rat population. So just to recap quickly, we used to shoot...
Yeah, I was going to say, Rich, just to jump in, can you clarify what you're referring to by your glory hole activities, just so we don't get in trouble?
So this is where we lose a load of viewers because they think it's not quite what they're expecting.
Yeah, we'll probably gain a load as well.
So one of my permissions is a chicken farm, and for years I've been shooting the rats when they come outside the chicken shed or one of the chicken sheds, just sort of picking off numbers for whatever reason when they move outside. And we've only ever really been kind of scratching at the surface. Now, but every 18 months or so, one of the sheds gets moved and the chicken flock is changed. And all the muck is picked up, and in that sort of, it's only usually a few days a week at most. Then we might shoot, several hundred because we can really sort of hammer the numbers. But for most of the time, and outside of that 18-month window or rotation, then we're just picking away at numbers on the outside. And we came up with the idea, and God knows why it took us this long, but we spoke to the farmer and said, "Look, if we can cut some holes in the side of the shed." Or even take the sides of the shed off, the glory holes, then we'll be able to target the rats underneath the shed. So the chickens sit on a layer about a metre off the ground, and then beneath them is basically rats and chicken poo. So we did that, and we have shot hundreds of rats. And it started off the first session, it was like a horror scene, just rats everywhere. And then over the last 3 weeks, the numbers have got lower and lower and lower, and the numbers have just declined. And now you kind of sit there and you might wait 20 minutes to see a rat. So it's had a real, a massive impact, to the point that there's another chicken shed where we're going to follow the same process, because the concern is that the rats from there will just migrate over to the shed that we've been shooting on, because there's less competition for food. So that's my not quite as exciting as people were thinking glory hole story. But interspersed with that, we had a bit of a murder mystery on the farm, because we had a chicken torn to pieces in the actual scratching. And now, there's thousands of birds in the scratching, and if a fox gets in there, then it's going to kill hundreds of birds, and many other birds will suffocate and what have you. But we just had one chicken that had been obviously caught by something, and we kind of ummed and ahed about what it could be. We're thinking a bird of prey or something. And then the farm is quite close to a river, and I recall seeing, over the years we've been fishing there, mink patrolling the banks on the river. So I thought it might possibly be a mink. So we put a dead chicken out, tied a dead chicken to a fence, put a trail camera up, and literally within hours, sure enough, there's a mink moving down the fence line. So another couple of sacrificial dead chickens later, I shot the mink, which I've seen lots, from a distance, but close up, you know, a beautiful thing. It really is. Kind of, it's got teeth you wouldn't want to tangle with, but a beautiful thing. But yeah, that was the mystery chicken murderer, who is no more. And I shot it with my Wolverine R because I thought, yes, that's the right kind of rifle for that.
Very, very appropriate. And actually, I will point out that we have got write-ups, we've got articles about your glory hole ratting and your mink shooting trip, or mink shooting campaign, I should say, on the Airgun Extra website, airgunextra.com. Yeah, I mean, for me, I was about to say that my rat shooting had been quite busy, but relative to the numbers that you've been doing, it's nowhere near. So basically, I've still been doing a fair amount of rabbit shooting, but more rat shooting. And really interestingly, I'd say the season's getting going early this year, or it never really died down like it usually does during the summer, to be honest with you. A lot of farms that I shoot on, it tends to be during the summer months when there are standing crops out in the fields, particularly maize crops. The rats seem to migrate to them. They've got shelter there, they've got food there, and numbers on the farm seem to sort of fairly naturally decline. It hasn't really happened this summer, and I think that is partly because it's been so dry up until recently, and the couple of farms where I've been shooting most have got big lagoons, and I just think that's giving the rats a water supply. Now, while I'm still probably shooting more of them around the animal feed, I think the fact that they've stayed resident on the farm is because there's plenty to drink there. So yeah, I've had a couple nights a week out, again having fun with the Alpex 4K. I've been so impressed with that piece of kit over the past few months. But for me, I'd say a typical night for me is probably shooting 15, maybe 20 rats in maybe sort of a 3-hour session. But that is, relative to the numbers that are on those holdings, that is making quite a significant difference. If you're doing those numbers twice a week, the next time you visit, you can see that there has been a reduction, as long as you don't leave it too long, and obviously the usual problem of them bouncing back. So yeah, my ratting never really slowed down through the summer, but now, as I said, you tend to lose a few to that migration to the standing crops. A lot of crops are coming in now, and now's the time that I really need to be mindful that I do keep on top of them, because otherwise they do quickly get out of hand, and I don't want to be in the situation that you've been in. And I know it's a bit more typical on poultry farms, but I'm shooting on sort of mixed farms where numbers don't tend to get quite that out of hand. One thing I've sorry, Rich, were you about to say something then?
I was going to say, have you been on the squirrels at all?
That was what I was about to move on to, and I was going to say that's something I would normally have been doing a lot of, because on a couple of the estates that I shoot on, keeping squirrels out of the woods is a massive concern. Obviously, the tree damage, the impact they have on native species, and also the expense on the estates where they have pheasant shoots of all the lost grain. However, this summer, I have hardly seen or shot any grey squirrels on my ground. Certainly not in comparison with usual years. And all right, it's been very hot. We've got a very early wild crop of things like acorns, beech mast, and all of the rest, which is probably and arguably distracting them and pulling them away from my feeders. But I've always been fairly confident, and I've said it loads of times, if you're offering grey squirrels peanuts, the pull of that bait, even when there's natural food around, tends to be, that's enough to lure them away and get them hooked on your feeders. I've got one feeder where a landowner told me he'd seen a lot of grey squirrels, so I went and immediately put up a feeder in an obvious looking spot. I reckon it's been up the best part of a month now, and apart from 1 or 2 peanuts that are presumably going to birds, because I'm not seeing those rejected, discarded husks that the squirrels usually leave behind, those brown papery husks. Apart from a few that seem to be going to birds, I don't think the squirrels are visiting that feeder. Now, the landowner says he has seen some, so let's assume that there are squirrels there. But the decline in the woods, the decline in activity, I don't think can be attributed just to the fact that there's loads of other food to distract them at the moment. Might be proven wrong later in the year when it gets cold and natural food starts to dwindle. But we were talking about this in the spring, weren't we? That a lot of people were saying to us, "Oh, where have the squirrels gone? Where are the grey squirrels? We're not seeing them." Of course, it's a good thing. They're an introduced species, and our aim is to get rid of them. But it's surprising how suddenly they seem to have not so much disappeared, but significantly reduced across what appears to be quite a huge area. How are you finding things on the squirrels?
Yeah, so I picked up a new permission about a couple of years ago or so ago now, and I had about 18 months of shooting a lot of squirrels in a section of the woods. And then for one reason or another, sort of spring and summer just didn't go there at all. And I've been thinking to myself, I need to get down there and move the feeders, because at the end of my campaign last time, the numbers really fell away, and I felt pretty confident I cleared a section of the woods. And then I hadn't moved the feeders; they're still in the same place as before. And I thought, well, they would have repopulated that area now. So went down, filled up the feeders. There's 3 feeders over about probably 400 meters. Filled them back up again. Put new batteries in the trail cameras, and funny enough, this was about a month or so ago. And today is the first time I've seen a squirrel on the trail camera. They've ignored the peanuts for best part of a month. Now, I would like to think that's because I cleared all the squirrels out, 6 or 8 months or so ago. But I'm not, that naive to think that is the case. I think that, yes, I did clear them out, but I think that the general population, for whatever reason, is just lower, that they haven't needed to repopulate this area. There is an awful lot of beech mast in these woods, huge amount of beech mast, and we walk along the floor and it's carpeted in broken husks. But the beech trees were there when I first started, 18 months or so ago, and I shot loads there. So yes, it's a bit of a mystery. I mean, it's one of those things where we do what we do because we want to eradicate grey squirrels, and then we moan when there's no grey squirrels left to shoot. But I'm going to be going back next week, because I think now is the time, if they are struggling for whatever reason, and if they are struggling to rebound from a harsh winter or whatever, now's the time to keep hitting them. Don't give them a chance to breed up again and go back to square one.
Yeah, I'd say that's exactly right. And while they're on the back foot, keep persisting. And if you can continue picking off 1 or 2, now is absolutely the time to do it. Because as we were saying with those rats, leave them, give them half a chance, and they quickly bounce back. And I do think that there is an argument that currently they're on natural food, but I do think a lot perished in the winter, and I've spoken about it before. That, as far as I understand, grey squirrels don't mind cold weather, but they don't do well when we have long periods of wet weather. Now, last winter, it's hard to recall because we've had such a long drought through the summer, but for about 9 months, it really didn't seem like it stopped raining. And we had 2 or 3 weekends where we had some massive storms, like on the bounce, and on several of the estates where I shoot, not only did some trees fall down that had drays in them, but I saw a lot of displaced drays that had been blown out on the ground. So then you've got squirrels that, even if they didn't perish because the tree they lived in fell down, they're suddenly exposed to the elements. I assume they can maybe sort of hole up in certain spots, but for some of them, they're going to find themselves, or would have found themselves, quite exposed during a lot of wet weather. And I just wonder if they got absolutely soaked and then perished during the cold nights. We will see. We will see, because at the moment it is hard to come up with anything conclusive because beech mast, acorns, etc. Yeah. But by early winter, I think we'll have an idea. But ultimately, if there are a hell of a lot less grey squirrels in the country than there were this time last year, it's good news, really.
And I'd love to know what other people's experiences. People listen to this. If people are finding fewer squirrels this time around than last year, or more squirrels, or the same, either way, I'd love to know.
Definitely, yeah. Do get in the comments or on the Airgun Extra Facebook page. Do let us know how you're getting on in terms of the numbers of squirrels that you're seeing and accounting for. Okay, then, Rich. So shall we move on to the kit section again? Do you want to lead the way on this?
Yeah. So we kicked off the thing. I think on the last podcast we were talking about kit that we've had for a long time that we wouldn't be without, and I think I talked about my game carrier. My piece of kit this week is my good old faithful beanbag seat, and it's a little bit kind of tatty. It's got some tape on it, and it could do with a few more beans in the beans in the bag. But I would not be without this. I've had this for years and years and years, and not only is it comes everywhere with me, because not only do I find myself sometimes, if I'm stalking around wanting to sit down to ambush something, it's a handy seat to have. I use it when I'm sometimes I shoot off standing behind the truck. If I'm ambushing rabbits, then I'll sometimes use the truck as a screen, and this will go on the flatbed, and this becomes a gun rest. It'll be coming out with me later on this evening when I'm out rabbit shooting when it gets dark, and I'll strap this to the window frame in my truck with a couple of bungee cords, and it's a gun rest there. So yeah, I mean, it's probably pretty disgusting, to be perfectly honest. It's been everywhere with me, but yeah, a really versatile, cheap piece of kit that I simply wouldn't be without. I've been sitting in the scratching field up at the chicken farm shooting rats with it, so it really is minging. But yeah, wouldn't be without this. And if you haven't got one, then I would suggest, almost any kind of shooting that you do, even when I've been out ambushing and I've ambushing rabbits and I've forgotten a bipod, this will do. It just stays in the truck with me all the time, and I wouldn't be without it. Now I know you're a big fan of the beanbag as well, Matt. But what's your bit of kit?
Well, before we move on, I just completely agree with you about a beanbag being such an underrated, really useful piece of airgun shooting kit. I can still remember what a game changer it was when I got my first one, because I'd kind of thought, what's the point? It's something else to carry. So it's probably about 20 years ago I gave up on just stuffing a bin liner in my pocket and unfolding that when I needed to sit down. And the first thing to strike me was how much warmer it was in the winter. Rather than having just a bin bag between my backside and then frost-hardened ground, suddenly I've got quite a nicely insulated cushion. Yeah. In wet conditions, it takes a little bit longer. Obviously, I was staying dry sitting on a plastic sheet, but if you're just sitting on the deck in your trousers, it takes a while. It has to be really wet for any moisture to come through the beanbag, so it's quite useful in that sense too. But also, another thing that really shocked me was what a stable platform it suddenly provided. Again, because I was sort of rolling around on my backside, just sat on a plastic bag or whatever. All of a sudden, being properly supported on a cushion just plants you to the deck. And later on, started moving on to using sticks as well. The combination of being sat on a beanbag seat and shooting from the support of sticks was just made a massive difference to my shooting. So, yeah, completely agree with that. And actually, funnily enough, it leads me on quite nicely because I almost always have a beanbag seat clipped to my Jack Pike rucksack that I use. It's a 25-litre rucksack. And if I'm roving around the woods, I know that I've got that I can clip off and sit down if I need to. However, when I'm travelling really, really light, maybe stalking rabbits, and I don't want the rucksack bumping around on my back, I take this old Jack Pike game bag. Not sure how clearly you can see that, but you can see it's seen some action. I must have had it for at least 10 years. And the basic premise is that shot quarry goes in the net bag at the front, and you can see I've got some very authentic pigeon feathers still stuck to it. It's got a really nice waterproof lining. This is the Duotex one, which it's tough. It looks like leather, and you can also see that I've modified this one. And I've snipped off the leather straps, because again, there were buckles as well. They got snipped off because they were just jingling a bit when I was stalking. I didn't want that extra noise. But when I want to travel really light and I don't want my backpack and I'm not carrying a beanbag seat, this is what I use. And also, I'll sometimes unfold the top, going back to my old bin liner days, put it on the ground, and I'll just sit on the lid flap if I want to sit at the base of a tree, if I linger for a while. So yeah, really useful bit of kit. Adjustable shoulder strap. I can also, if I'm roving around the woods, I can get about a bag of about 12 pints of peanuts in there. So if I'm going to check on a peanut feeder, again, I'll just chuck that over my shoulder. If I've got the gun as well, I know I've got a game carrier incorporated into that. So yeah, just a really useful old piece of kit, not ridiculously expensive. I've got a few actually I use for different things. I've got one that I use for bass fishing. So again, if I'm going sort of lure fishing from rocks, put a few little boxes of tackle into that, chuck the bag over my shoulder. I've got a game bag that I'll then probably put a carrier bag in it as well. So I can, obviously, if I catch fish, I can put those into the game bag in a carrier bag. No, just a really nice, versatile, and yeah, trusty, tried and tested old bit of kit. Do you ever use a game bag, Rich?
I do occasionally, to be honest. I tend to not like sort of stuff on me when I'm shooting. But yeah, if I have to, then a lot of my shooting also is, I can, especially rabbits, I can leave them, where they fall and pick them up later. But on some permissions, just the layout is such that I have to sort of pick up as I go along. And it's amazing how many you can get in one of those bags, actually.
Yeah, it is. And in fact, you're right about not necessarily wanting to have, be wrapped up in things. I do sometimes find that with my rucksack that I carry a lot. Sometimes you just feel slightly overburdened. And with this, it is worth making sure that you strap it, for me, across my left shoulder, so I can shoulder the gun and not feel like it's getting in the way when I want to settle into the gun. But no, brilliant little piece of kit. And like I say, when I want to be really mobile and travel very, very light, that's what I tend to opt for.
One thing I've got in the habit of, with regards to rabbits and squirrels as well, actually, is if I'm moving around and I don't want to take them with me, and I'm obviously concerned potentially about a fox picking them up, is I take some like Ziploc plastic bags with me now, pop a rabbit in there, zip it up, and they're completely airtight. And it also means not only was it going to reduce the likelihood of a fox picking it up, but it also means that it's very obvious where it is when you kind of come back and you're looking for it. So I've kind of got in that habit, and also it just keeps things a little bit cleaner. So yeah, if you do find yourself walking around and leaving stuff where you shoot it, plastic bags.
Good stuff. In fact, I know we wanted to keep it low tech, low cost, but I will just quickly mention another piece of kit that I've been using. In fact, the latest episode of the main show that's just gone out, I think it's in the review section of that, I was sent the Taipan Veteran II by Range Right to try out. And wow, what an airgun. I mean, it's a super high-end Czech PCP. I think prices start in the ballpark of £1,700. I had the tactical version with the 700mm barrel. I think that's, I don't know, it's over £1,000, maybe £1,200. Sorry, over £2,000.
Yeah,
Sorry, yeah. So again, it's an expensive airgun, but my goodness, first time I picked it up, again, because of the 700mm barrel, even in its bullpup configuration, I thought, crikey, this gun's a bit of a chunk, and maybe, well, almost certainly not something you'd want to lug around the field all day. However, put it on the bench, and it's just a pellet on pellet machine, and you can see, and first thing I'd say is you don't have to spend that much money to get a good airgun, but if you do, you get an amazing airgun in this case, and you can see the difference. It might not be a huge difference between that and a gun that costs £500 less, but you can see where it's gone. You can see that that extra spend has got you more refinement, more consistency. And yeah, what an amazing airgun. The one I was sent was a sub-12. Oh, I can't wait to get my hands on an FAC rated one, because I think that performance put to the proper, tested to the limits at long range, I think that would be quite amazing.
Funny enough, I was having a similar conversation with someone on Facebook, I think, about basically the merits of, is a £2,000 rifle worth it when it'll do the same thing as a £500 rifle? And the best analogy that I could come up with is that, like if you have a cheapy car, when you slam the door, it kind of makes a sort of a very hollow, tinny sound. And then when you push the door shut on a Range Rover or something, or a top-end car, it just kind of shuts quietly and smoothly and everything. The difference in engineering between your high-end rifle, which is the sort of the Range Rover door kind of thing, and the cheaper rifle, which is your sort of Ford Escort door. That to me, it's a whole tactile difference. But the quality of the engineering is just that little bit more. Things are made to a little bit better tolerances and
little things like when you're working the side lever, just hearing the magazine indexing, you can just tell that the tolerances are just bang on, and it does make hitting longer targets easier. It's clearly holding a tighter group at longer range with the right ammo. So yeah, well impressed with that. But let's move on, because we didn't want to linger too much on the super high end stuff for this podcast. So let's move on to the Q&A section. That is brought to you in association with Anglia Tackle and Gun. Brilliant gun shop, lots of airgun gear. As the name implies, they also sell fishing tackle. I will make sure there's a link to their website in the podcast description. And there is also a discount code, which from memory I think is Airgun Extra, all one word, all lowercase. But again, we'll make sure that is in the description. Rich, do you want to kick us off with the first question?
This was a really good one. Came in from Gary Thompson via Facebook, and I've been thinking about this an awful lot since Gary sent this in, and he asks, do you think .25 caliber at 12 foot-pounds is viable for short to medium range pest control or hunting? Have you done any 12 foot-pound .25ing that?
Very, very little. Not enough to comment with any authority. I would say that I believe it would certainly be viable close to mid-range. There is no doubt going to be quite a pronounced trajectory to deal with, although at close to mid-range, again, that's not going to be such an issue. Look, if you're using a modern digital optic, I've just talked about the fun I've been having with the Alpex 4K Lite over the past few months. Or if you get the version that's got a laser rangefinder and a ballistic calculator, it's getting to the point that it doesn't matter how curvy a trajectory is, because it will compensate for you and put you bang on target. One thing I would say about .25 at sub 12 foot-pounds, and this isn't from my own experience, but from a video I saw on YouTube, which must have been probably a good 10 years ago, was a chap was using, sub 12, .25, very heavy ammo as it's going to be. He was shooting rats. Now, he wasn't shooting them at really close range, so I don't know, 20, maybe 25 meters, which for me, for most of my ratting, that's a long shot. And some of these rats were dodging the pellets. Now, I don't believe for 1 second that they were doing it deliberately, but they were clearly jumping or flinching at the muzzle report from the gun. And because that 2.5 pellet was so slow, because obviously it has to be to stay sub 12, that flinch, that jump, was enabling the rats to move far enough that occasionally the pellet was missing them. So yeah, that's as much as I can bring to that.
Yeah, I've shot 2.5 caliber in FAC, which sort of negates the whole 12 foot-pound argument. But yeah, I mean, the 2.5 pellets I use are, I think they're just under 34 grains, so they're twice as heavy, more than twice as heavy as the typical 2.2 pellet that I shoot. So at 12 foot-pounds, I'm guessing that's going to be 500 feet per second, possibly a little bit less. I don't know. So yeah, pretty slow. And I would say, yeah, for short and medium distance, and I know what's medium distance, 15 meters, 18 meters. Yeah, you're probably okay. And it will hit obviously harder than a 2.2. But I think that the main thing is that you still have to be accurate, because a misplaced 2.5 won't kill any more effect, won't compensate for a poorly placed shot. You'll still have to place the pellet in the right spot. And I don't know if a 2.5 in the right spot will kill any more effectively than a 2.2 in the right spot. So I wonder. I'm sure it will do the job. Will it do the job more effectively than the 2.2? I don't know, but it has made me think that I need to get my hands on a 2.5 12 foot-pound rifle and find out, because I think it would be really interesting to find out. But yeah, and to your point, Matt, most of my rat shooting is, well, the other night I was shooting them at 8 meters, some of them, 8 to sort of 14, 15 meters. And I would imagine it would be fantastic for that. But
I think so. I think so. And potentially heart and lung shots could be more dependable as well, because generally, I do a lot of ratting using 177. I use 2.2. I use 1772. And yeah, you put a 177 pellet in the head, that rat's dead. I wouldn't consider heart and lung shots with 177. I think you'd still get a kill, but they'd probably run on, and most of the places I shoot, they want the rats picked up, so I like them to literally fall where they're hit. But I do wonder, again, if we're talking like 8 to 15, 16 meters, maybe if you hit a rat good and square in the heart and lung area, I'd imagine the shock that would deliver could be lethal. And again, I talked about the point that they were flinching and occasionally dodging the pellet. Well, at those closer ranges, I would guess they've only got half as much time to do that, and it's I guess it's unlikely to happen. But yeah, I think certainly from a explorational point of view, I think that there could be a video there that we need to get on with and do some comparisons.
Excuse to buy another gun as well.
Yeah, we don't need many excuses for that. Yeah. I just pretend that it's one that's come for review when I buy a new one.
So I've got another question, Matt, that came in. I think this was via Facebook as well. I haven't got the chap's name, but he's saying, I've got a new woodland permission where I'm tasked with grey squirrel control. How shall I go about making sure that I'm putting my feeders in the right place? What's the process you go through?
Well, I'm not doing very well lately, so don't ask me. No, I'll tell you what. Normally, so got woodland permission, tasked with grey squirrel control. I want to make sure my feeder's going exactly the right place, or the best place. First thing is I have a walk around and hope to see a few squirrels on the move. The areas where I see the most squirrels will be the areas that I'll consider starting off in. It stands to reason, really. If I don't see any or many squirrels, I'll be looking for signs of them. They're drays, most obviously. And the sort of places where they might have drays that I can't see. So thick patches of ivy up in trees. That's the sort of habitat that squirrels will like if you can't see any obvious drays. So anyway, I'll start with that sort of approach to find an area that I think has got one of the highest levels of squirrel activities, let's say, in those woods. To narrow it down, I want ideally to have my feeder on a prominent tree that has plenty of interconnecting branches with other trees, because you get a lot of squirrels approaching from the ground, but I think you get more approaching from above if the tree your feeder is on has got plenty of branches linking it up to other trees, because you always get a few squirrels that seem to be reluctant to travel across the ground. They feel safer in the trees. I try to position it high enough that it's out of the way of deer, and low enough that I can refill it without without too much discomfort. The other, obviously, very important consideration when it comes to sighting a feeder, not just if we're not just thinking about where it's going to be, where the squirrels can find it, but you need to be able to get clear, safe shots at that feeder. So you need to find not only a tree that you think looks like a good one because squirrels will come to it, but also somewhere within sensible shooting distance you can put up a hide that is giving you shots in a safe direction, with a clear view of the feeder. And also, I like to be able to see the ground beneath the feeder, just in case on the odd occasion you get a squirrel comes down and it needs a follow-up shot. I like to be able to see them hit the deck, and I can visually confirm that they're stone dead, and wait for the next one to come along, or if not, get a follow-up shot in very quickly. So, yeah, I think that's my superficial approach. And again, those most productive areas will very often be the places where the oak trees are because of the acorns, and the beech trees are because of the beech mast. But yeah, try to get actual sightings of squirrels. Failing that, you want to be looking for the sort of habitat that they're going to like. Anything to add to that, Rich? I know you have a lot of success with great squirrel control.
Yeah. I obviously all of those points I totally agree. I think trail cameras are a great tool to use, because yes, you can look at the amount of feed that's going down in your feed, and that will give you a good indication that if squirrels are there or not. But a trail camera will not only tell you how busy your feeder is, but also tell you what times of day the squirrels are coming in and feeding. And some of my permissions, they're first thing in the morning up until about 11 o'clock. They're nothing till very late afternoon. Also, I use a lot of the metal feeders that have a lid on them, and squirrels have to learn to sort of open the lid to get a squirrel out, to get a peanut out. Now, when I put one of those up to start with, I always tape the lid up so the lid is open, because I think that attracts the birds in a little bit more, and that just creates a bit of interest from the squirrels. And also, to start with, squirrels, they don't know what to do. It takes them a while to learn that behavior. And I've even had squirrels come to a feeder, and you can tell the ones that have been there before, because they'll come in, they'll open the lid, take a peanut, and get shot. Others will come and they'll kind of sniff around and they'll poke about and they can smell the feeders, but they've obviously never been there before. And I think if you can just sort of kind of wean them onto the fact that there's, easy food there. I would also say, interconnected trees, definitely. I'd also steer clear of very open areas of woodland, because they'll be concerned about birds of prey. And I tend to try and pick sort of thicker, darker areas of wood. If there's any pine trees in a wood, I'll kind of head to that spot first and foremost. And then the other thing is also, and I've come across against this before, I've gone down before now, I put my feeder or a couple of feeders up, and I thought I'll give that a couple of weeks to for that to get busy, and then I've gone back and I can't find the feeder, so and I now put like a piece of fluorescent tape on a nearby marker so that I can know exactly where my feeder is, or I use like what 3 words or something, because especially if you're in fairly thick woods, the trouble with trees is they all look the same, and and it's, if you put a hide up, then that's easier, because a hide is relatively easy to spot. But I've stumbled around for ages looking for a feeder on a tree, knowing it's generally in the area, only to find it's even just 30 yards away. So if you're going to woods for the first time putting up feeders, just make a mental note, or even better, like a visual clue as to where they are. Save you a lot of frustration in the long run.
Yeah, so it's a really good point. Really good point about birds of prey, and it's a bit of a balance that you have to strike, because you can think, oh, this is a brilliant tree because you can see it from all around. It's really open, and if one squirrel comes, all the others in the vicinity are going to see it, and that's great. But you get a tree that's too open, they do feel very exposed, very vulnerable to birds of prey, and that's when I often find that you get the squirrels that literally dart in, grab a peanut and zip off again, and that can get really, really frustrating. So do try and find somewhere where they feel safe to sit and feed. But again, going back to our earlier conversation, hopefully we will all have an opportunity before too long to put this to the test when there's less natural food around, and we can crack on as we were. So this is a great one, Rich. I've been looking forward to answering this one. Can't remember who it came from actually, but it's a question that I get asked quite frequently. So, do you ever get frightened when you're out hunting on your own at night? Fire away.
God, all the time. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I think this is probably a curse of people who work in the media industry, that your imagination's going all the time. And yeah, once you get, a thought in your head, for me, it's very hard to shake. I shoot on a permission that, well, it's weird actually, because I shoot on a permission that has an old Roman fort. It's just sort of the earthworks for it, but clearly was quite a major Roman emplacement years ago. And I shoot there, early hours of the morning. Never had a problem at all. Never sort of, never felt kind of spooky at all. And then I had a golf course permission. And it's actually the only permission I've ever given up. Not because I'm, a scaredy pants, but and on the grounds of this this golf course is I think it's an old monastery or nunnery or something. There's not much left to it. It's just some kind of bits of wall and what have you. And the trouble with golf course permissions is you can only shoot there at night, because otherwise golfers get in the way during the day. So always shooting there in the dark, early hours of the morning, and an awful lot of deer there as well that you can hear kind of crashing around. And I can remember once I was shooting on one of the tees, and it's really sort of high elevated tee, looking downhill, and there's a really big thick hedgerow on the left. And I was laid on the top tier of this tee with a rifle on the bipod, looking down this hedgerow in the dark, night vision on everything. And I just suddenly got really kind of jittery. And, nothing happened to make me jittery, but I just kind of, in my mind, felt that I wasn't alone. And, as say, 2:00 in the morning on your own, these things kind of get into your mind, and every single mouse that rummages around in the hedgerows sounds like an axe murderer. And I got really spooked, and I ended up shooting nothing that night, coming home early. But yeah, and that's the only time really. A couple of times I would have been fishing, similar sorts of things. I was fishing we went on a holiday down to somewhere in Devon, and had some, I think it's an old quarry or reservoir or something, had a dam down one end. And I wasn't aware of any, ghost stories or something, but I can remember packing up one evening there on my own in the place, and I found myself packing up quicker and quicker and quicker, and almost throwing the gear in the back of the car. So I've never seen anything or anything. I don't particularly believe in that stuff, but yeah, sometimes you're a victim of your own imagination, I would say. How about you? Any ghosty stories with you, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of do I get frightened? I'll tell you what, there's got to be a BRK ghost pun here as well, hasn't there? But no, look, I almost all of my shooting, apart from when we're filming, these days is done on my own. Loads of that is night shooting, and most of the time, the thought doesn't pop into my head that there could be something spooky, scary, what have you, out there. But on the odd occasion that it does, it's surprising. Like you said, if you let that thought creep in, and then your imagination starts to spiral, you start looking over your shoulder. And I have had a few occasions when I've been out, sort of shooting a long way from the car at night, and usually I've watched something stupid, like a really creepy film or something like that. In fact, I try to avoid anything like that close to a night shooting session if I'm going somewhere really remote, because the second those thoughts start popping in. But yeah, I remember on one occasion, and also where I shoot on some of the ground I shoot on the Somerset levels, where it can get very misty, and something popped into my head. And the next thing I stupidly thought, how scary would it be in this mist if, like, the next time I pop the thermal spotter on for a quick look, what if there was just somebody stood 2 or 3 feet in front of me? I thought, why did you think something that stupid? Next thing, I'm starting to look over my shoulder. And then the next thing after that, I'm trotting off back to the car, still looking over my shoulder, thinking, what am I doing out here? I've got to get home. So yeah, that's a rare one. Like you, where I live, we've got a lot of old sort of like Roman relics. So yeah, old forts, like the sort of the burial mounds, and they've all got their sort of myths and legends around them about so and so saw this and somebody else saw that. In fact, there's a cracking story about one of the Roman hill forts very close to where I live, of somebody camping there once. This was when I was just a kid, and he heard like what he thought was cattle outside of his tent, because it was sort of dairy grazing ground. Unzipped his tent to have a look, and a legend has it that as he looked out of his tent, there's a Roman on horseback, so your usual sort of spooky, glowing white apparition. And again, local legend has it that within minutes he was back at the village. He'd left his tent, he'd ran down the hill across the fields and was banging at a mate's door saying, let me in, let me in. Now, logic tells me that if there's a scrap of truth in that, he'd probably gone to sleep fearing that this was or just, you know, aware of the fact that this place has got a bit of legend attached to it. Maybe had a dream, woke up half awake, half asleep, but saw something, but thought it was something else, and off he dashed. I don't know. Logic tells me he wasn't chased off that hill by a Roman horseman, but we will never know. But funny enough, very close to that ground where it levels off, and it is very, very level. Through the autumn and winter, it can get quite marshy, so it's quite firm ground, but it's got like an inch or two of soft, marshy, just squidgy sort of surface layer. And one night I was out rabbit shooting on this ground. Again, complete darkness until I sort of popped the spotter on. Couldn't see a single thing. In fact, I reckon this was pre-thermal days. Just as before I put the lamp on, I couldn't see anything. I'm moving across this fairly flat ground, and it's suddenly terrifyingly apparent to me that there are footsteps following me from behind, saying sort of, I don't know, 15 feet behind me. So I can hear my own feet sort of squelch, 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 and then I can hear at a similar pace, sort of like a slurpy squelch behind me, a bit fainter. So probably had a headlamp on, flicked the headlamp on, swung round, nothing there. Oh, well, that's weird. So I've gone a bit further and these footsteps start again, swung round again, and there was like literally 1 or 2 footsteps to be heard after I'd stopped, but nothing there. And I'm getting properly spooked now. Like, this is just inexplicable. I can hear somebody walking behind me, clear as anything, but there is absolutely nothing behind me that I can see. And I'm right out in the sticks now. I'm a long way from the car. Can't even see lights of houses. It's a properly remote, lonely place. Walk on a bit further and these footsteps start up again. I thought, I've got to stop and work this out. And the penny then dropped, thank goodness, that as I was walking on this marshy surface over this firm ground, obviously my feet were squelching with each step. But unbeknown to me, right, because it's so spongy, that my footprints that I was making were rising back up with a slight slurp. And because it's so consistent, they were literally rising back up with the same time gap between them as my steps just behind me. And as they were rising, they were making that sort of squelch, very faint squelchy slurping sound, which sounded just like somebody walking behind. And yeah, you wouldn't, again, you wouldn't believe it unless you'd witnessed it. But that to me, and again, imagination may have been playing a part too, but it sounded exactly like somebody walking just behind me at the same pace as I was. And the relief of working it out. But again, I think by then I'd kind of got sufficiently rattled to think, now's a very good time to head back to the car. And I bet you I still had a few glances over my shoulder. But no, generally, there was a wood with a release pen that used to get a lot of rats around it. And for some reason or other, I couldn't night shoot in those woods on mine. I think being in the woods at night, that can be, like you alluded to earlier, it's like someone's turned the volume up. If a badger goes across the ground or a deer, it sounds like someone's absolutely, like a bear's chasing you. But this place was a bit spooky. Another thing that sometimes rattles me a bit is if I'm roost shooting and I stay, as I often do, until it's properly dark. And I don't feel at all spooked, don't think about it. And then I put my torch on. Of course, in woodland, when you start showing a torch around, usually this is for picking up. So I'm trying to find what I've shot on the ground. And as you swing the torch around, the shadows of the trunks start to shift behind the trunks and sort of skip across the trees behind them. And it looks like people are running around behind each layer of trees as you get further away. And again, there's a perfectly logical explanation, but it's just a bit spooky. Finally, one time, again, I could go on all night with these anecdotes. One time I was scared half to death. So I was very lucky as a youngster. Kev Hawker, my uncle, only about 10 years older than me, was basically my shooting mentor. He used to let me tag along and go shooting with him. We'd been up on some woods on the top of a hill. Again, we'd shot until dark, but to get back to the car, we'd go across a couple of fields, and one of them had a very high maize crop. Now, we'd unloaded, so we knew the guns were safe before we started walking back. Stomping through the maze, I'm following Kev. Again, it's dark. I'm about 12, 13 years old. Maze is well over the top of my head. And we're literally going through the tram lines to cut through it. Rather than going all the way around it, which would have been a lot further, we're cutting through this maze. Kev's powering on ahead of me, and I'm dropping behind. And I can remember starting to talk to myself, because I reckon I was a bit just trying to console myself and keep myself company, because I felt like I was being left alone in this maze. The next thing I know, so I sort of lost sight and sound of Kev. And the next thing I knew, something had leapt out of the maze, literally right in front of me, and shouted. And it was Kev, who thought that was absolutely hilarious and had deliberately powered ahead so he could get off to the side, hide in the crop, and then jump back into the tram line. If it had happened to me at this age now, I would almost certainly have had a heart attack. I think I was too frightened to even scream, and how I didn't drop my gun is an absolute miracle. But he thought that was absolutely hilarious. I thought it was absolutely terrifying. Nothing supernatural there, but yeah, still a really frightening one. So that's scary stories.
Again, I would love to know from people listening to this and watching this if they've ever had any experiences at all. Everyone loves a good ghost story. I mean, I'm not going to read them until it's daylight, and I'm not going out shooting at night for a while. But yeah, I would love to know other people's experiences.
Definitely, yeah. Do let us know again in the comments or via any of the social media, because I'd certainly like to hear them. Like you said, the trouble is that they'll frighten us, and it'll plant that seed. Next time we're out, and we'll start thinking about it. But look, I think we've got time to squeeze in one more.
Yep.
So this is a question from Neil Moore, who contacted me via Facebook, and he says he sells the rabbits that he shoots to a company that uses them to make dog food. Now, he usually does his shooting on Friday and Saturday nights, but the company doesn't open for him to drop them off until the Monday. So his question to me was, can you store, or could he store those rabbits in his van sometime from Friday through to Monday before he drops them off? What do you reckon? And what are your theories on storing something that's going to end up in the food chain?
My kind of general sense is probably no. I think probably, and if he guts them, that's better than not gutting them. And if it's in the winter when it's very cold overnight, probably okay. But I mean, for I don't know, 10 months of the year, I would say it probably isn't that cold enough. My sense is probably no. To be perfectly honest, I if I shoot some rabbits tonight, they'll stay in the back of the truck, and I'll take them to the falconry centre in the morning. And even then, it can get a little bit funky, in the when you open the tail gate on the truck again. But I guess the thing to do is to ask the people that you're selling the rabbits to, would be the sort of the easiest way. But my sense would be probably not. And having said that, my dog eats cat poo, so it's not that fussy. But I would say probably not. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
That was pretty much my feeling. I mean, it was during the really hot weather as well. So I was also thinking it's probably going to stink his van out, because if it's going from Friday night through to Monday morning, that's more than 48 hours. Yeah. Those rabbits are going to be humming, aren't they? Or likely to be. So no, I was thinking, right, there is the argument that this isn't the human food chain, so I'm not sure what the requirements are going to be. But yeah, ask the people that are receiving them, because they know the sort of quality that they want. They might not care that the guts are in them. Personally, apart from the rabbits that I give, again, to a falconry centre, and even then, because the places that I tend to shoot them when they go into that place are close to there, I usually put them in a plastic sack when I finish shooting, drop them off behind a wall at the falconry centre, stick a block over them, and text the owner and say, "Hey, there's a bag of rabbits ready for you." That's the only real occasion when I'll leave guts and rabbits anyway. If I'm eating them or giving them to friends to eat, at the end of the session, the guts come out so that it doesn't putrefy the meat. And then, I try to get them prepped and chilled as quickly as possible. There's a lot to be said. If you're in a real hurry and you can't prep your rabbit and get it in the fridge or freezer straight after you've shot it, there's a lot to be said for just how cold a concrete garage floor can be if you need to keep them a bit cooler overnight. But generally for me, more often than not, if I'm taking rabbits home, they're for human consumption. Like I say, if they don't go to the falconry centre, and then I'm super careful. So I'd say not, but I think your advice to check with the people that are receiving them is the way to go. And well done for finding an outlet. And I think he even said also, I sell my shot rabbits, so doubly well done for getting a few quid for them too. So yeah, make sure they're getting them in the nick that they want, because you don't want to lose that gig.
Yeah, absolutely.
That brings us to the end of the Q&A section. As I said, that's brought to you by Anglia Tackle and Gun. I will put a link to their website in the description. As I said, there is a discount code. If you get a chance to visit them, they're based in Norwich, and they are also on Facebook. I want to say thanks again to Crackshot. They're based near Newton Abbot and Devon. We'll put their website in the description. But yes, great shop, friendly team, loads of stock, and they've got a couple of indoor ranges there, and they are also on Facebook. Don't forget to give us a follow on the Airgun Extra Facebook page, where we keep you up to date with everything we're putting out on YouTube and on the website. So, Rich, thanks for your time, and thanks to everybody for tuning in. We will catch up with you again in a few weeks.
Providing nationally recognised third-party accreditation through Lantra, the Airgun Proficiency Course, APC, sets the standard in UK airgun training.
The Great British Shooting Show, held on the 13th to the 15th of February 2026 at the NEC Birmingham. Book tickets online at shootingshow.co.uk.